Hey, if I were a bit younger, I'd totally start my own business. But now I'm too old to try new things. That job? Nah, I need a diploma for that and I never got one. I always dreamed of a side hustle, but who has the time? Of course they picked him over me. He was the smartest kid in school. I grew up in a tiny village where education was a joke. That's why I never got a good education. Sound familiar? Bet you've heard these lines before. Know what they are? Excuses. Yep, these are the excuses we cook up to justify why we aren't doing certain things or why we're not successful. We tell ourselves these excuses so we don't feel bad. But guess what? Excuses are like a disease, and in this video, I'll show you how to cure it. Plus, we'll dive into lessons on fear, self-confidence, thinking big, and thinking creatively. All these nuggets of wisdom come from a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. Let's kick off with the excuses. I was born in a small village and lived there until I was 18. Back in high school, we had this middle-aged neighbor who couldn't stop talking about his university days and how he was the top of his class. He'd go on about how tough it was during the Soviet era and how he managed without any financial help from his family. He'd brag about his friends who are now big shots in Moscow. One day I asked him how he ended up in our village working a low-paying job despite being so successful at university. He paused for a few seconds and said it was his dream to move to Moscow. But then he got married and had kids, and that's why he couldn't be as successful as his friends. He basically said he wasn't successful because of his wife and kids. At the time, I thought he'd sacrificed his career for his family. But after reading The Magic of Thinking Big, I realized he was just using his family as an excuse for his lack of success. The author says that the more successful someone is, the fewer excuses they make. It's always the folks who aren't going anywhere in life who have a laundry list of excuses for why they can't, why they won't, and why they aren't. If you want something, you find a way. If not, you find an excuse. Simple as that. Your friends might give you a little sympathy, but they won't respect you if you're always complaining. Thoughts, whether positive or negative, get stronger with constant repetition. Once you convince yourself with an excuse, your brain checks out and doesn't look for other ways to reach your goal. One of the most common excuses is thinking you're not smart enough or educated enough. This one's super common. Lots of people around us have it to different extents. Here are 3 ways to kick this excuse to the curb. First, always remember that your attitude is way more important than your intelligence. The author talks about his friend who didn't have one arm but was a great golfer. When asked how he was so good at golf despite his missing arm, he replied, "The right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude with 2 arms every time." Let me repeat that. The right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude and 2 arms every time. Picture this. You're the boss, and there are 2 accountants working for you. The first accountant has years of experience and does his job well. The second accountant is a newbie. The first guy just does what he's asked, nothing more. But the second one? He helps his colleagues when he finishes his work early. He welcomes new employees and offers help. If there's something he can do in the marketing department, he jumps in without saying, "That's not my job." He's all about helping the whole company succeed, not just sticking to his job description. As the owner, if you had to promote one of these 2, who would you choose? I'm betting you'd pick the second accountant because he has the right attitude. Experience and intelligence are great, but without the right attitude, they're not much. I've seen this play out in real life many times. Look around your workplace and you'll see it too. If you want to move up, changing your attitude can make a huge difference. Second, knowing how to think is more important than raw intelligence. The person who knows how to use their brain and imagination to solve problems will always outshine the one who just crams facts. Imagine you're interviewing 2 people for your business. The first candidate walks in and you ask if they know the height of the building you're in. They say, "Oh yeah, I worked as an architect and memorized the height of all the buildings here. This one is 25 meters. Correct answer, right? Then the second candidate walks in. You ask the same question. They look at you and say, "I don't know. Give me a minute." They run outside, measure their shadow, then the building's shadow, do some quick calculations and come back saying the building is about 23 meters. Who would you hire? I'd hire the second candidate, even though their answer wasn't precise. They know how to think and use their brain creatively. Today, more than ever, we need people who can think on their feet. In school, we learn to solve multiple choice questions, but real-life problems aren't multiple choice. Options aren't laid out for us. We have to think outside the box. We're so used to multiple choice that even when you ask a friend where they want to eat, they say, "What are my options?" Instead of coming up with an idea, they want choices to pick from. So remember, thinking ability trumps memorizing facts. You might not ace every test, but you have a unique way of thinking. Third, never underestimate your own intelligence and never overestimate others. Don't sell yourself short. Focus on your strengths and discover your hidden talents. Another excuse we often use is age. No matter where we are in life, we've all used it or heard it. This excuse has shut the door on countless opportunities for so many people. They think they're too old or too young and don't even try. For instance, let's say you're 40 and want to start your own business, but you think you're too old. Before you quit, let me ask a few questions. What's the average age we start being productive? Probably around 20, right? And when do we usually stop being productive? Maybe around 70. Some folks are productive even after 70, but let's go with 70. So we have about 50 years to be productive. If you're 40, you've only spent 20 years being productive. That means you still have 30 years left. You haven't even hit the halfway mark of your productive years, and you're saying you're too old to try new things. You might not trust me, but trust the math. Lesson number 2, how to think big. Most people can't even imagine thinking big. They don't let themselves daydream about having $1 million in their account. Don't get me wrong, dreaming big is essential. Most of us limit ourselves with small thinking. We play it safe, dreaming of manageable, easy-to-achieve goals. But thinking big pushes us out of our comfort zones and opens up new possibilities. David Schwartz's book teaches us to dream big and believe in our dreams. It's not about being unrealistic. It's about expanding our horizons and setting ambitious goals. Remember, it's not just about dreaming big, but also about taking action. Dream big, plan well, and work hard. That's the magic formula. I'm not saying just think big and everything will magically fall into place. Nope, not at all. Thinking big is just the kickoff. After you've set those big goals, you've got to hustle. You have to do stuff most people won't. You'll fail a bunch of times and have to get back up again. You've got to read a lot and work smart. There are tons of steps you need to take after you start thinking big. Thinking big is just the first step. If you can't even do that, sorry, but there's not much hope for you. When I was in college, most of my classmates had goals like getting their diplomas and landing a job at a solid company or bank. But a few had bigger dreams. They wanted to start their own companies. Years later, looking back, I see that both groups are on track with their goals. If your goal is just to get your diploma and work for a good company, you're setting the bar too low. It's like saying you want to go to the gym every day just so you can do 20 push-ups. When it comes to success, people aren't measured by weight, degrees, or background. They're measured by how big they think. The biggest weakness people have is underestimating themselves and setting low expectations. If your buddy Tom aims to make $1 million but you think that's impossible, why would he want you as a partner for his new business? If you don't think you deserve that gorgeous girl, why would she think you do? If you're 20 and applying to my company and all you care about is remote work, meal vouchers, vacation days, and the retirement plan, why should I hire you? Here's a tip for avoiding day-to-day arguments and problems. To dodge 90% of arguments with your partner or at work, whenever a spat starts, ask yourself this: is this something that someone important like me would waste time arguing about? You'll soon skip a lot of pointless arguments. Remember, you don't win anything by arguing. Next up, let's tackle fear. You've definitely been scared of something or someone at some point. Maybe you were scared of failing a test and feeling embarrassed, losing your job, or talking to your boss. And when you told your friend, they just said, "Come on, let's go grab lunch." You're overreacting. It's all in your head. Friends and family mean well when they say, "It's just in your mind," or "It's just your imagination." But the truth is, fear is real and powerful. And sure, it's in my mind. It's not supposed to be in my foot. So don't expect me to calm down by saying it's just in my mind. Fear and lack of self-confidence are real and are the biggest enemies of success. Fear of all kinds is like a mental disease. And guess what the cure is? Action. Ever seen someone standing by a pool scared to jump in? They just stand there doing nothing. Then someone gives them a push and suddenly, the fear's gone. They're in the water. Action kills fear. Here's a story from the book to illustrate this. The author talks about a sales manager who was terrified he'd lose his job because sales were down in his department. After listening to his worries, the author asked what actions he was taking to fix things. The manager looked puzzled and asked what he meant. The author said, "I get that you're scared and anxious, but what are you doing to avoid losing your job or to lessen the impact?" The manager had no action plan. So the author suggested 2 steps. First, list ways to boost sales and implement them immediately. Second, as a backup, start looking for other job opportunities. A few weeks later, the manager called to say that after their meeting, he took action, sales improved, and he even had job offers from other companies. But he decided to stay because things were going well. See, when we're scared, we forget we can act. We get paralyzed and wait for the worst or hope for the best. Here's a little exercise for dealing with fear. When you're scared, split it into 2 parts. On the left, write down what you're afraid of. On the right, write what actions you can take to reduce or eliminate that fear. Do this immediately because the longer you wait, the bigger the fear gets. Giving time to fear is like giving fertilizer to weeds. For example, once I had to send an important email to my whole department. I was scared of the reaction, so I put it off. After a few days, I finally sat down to write the email, but I couldn't. Those days were spent imagining negative reactions, how it might ruin my relationships with colleagues and how some might start hating me. Waiting made it worse. The truth is, no one achieves anything worthwhile without facing criticism. So act quickly and decisively. Hesitation only makes fear grow. Now let's talk about the fear of other people and how to be confident when dealing with them. A few years ago, I worked with a manager who was highly respected, knowledgeable, and serious. Every time I talked to him, I got nervous. His presence made me double-check everything I said to avoid sounding stupid. Every meeting and discussion with him was a stress test for my mind and body. One day at a boxing class, the trainer couldn't make it. Instead of leaving, I suggested we train together and everyone agreed. A few minutes later, this manager walked in saying he wanted to start boxing too. I explained the situation and he decided to train anyway. I was nervous again because of my past experiences with him. But after 10 minutes, I noticed how much he struggled. He punched like a beginner, was out of breath, and looked embarrassed. I thought, he's just like me. My first time in training, I felt exactly like him. He might be a top manager, but deep down, we're the same. We both get scared, struggle with new things, and have personal problems. After this, I never felt nervous around him. We even became closer because of my relaxed attitude. Now, whenever I meet someone important, I imagine them in that boxing class. It reminds me that everyone is human. People aren't as intimidating as we make them out to be. Strip away titles and positions, and we're all the same. There's no reason to be scared. Maybe you have someone in your life who scares you. Imagine them in a sport you're good at, struggling to keep up with you. This approach can help put things in perspective. It might sound strange, but it works for me and could work for you too. Now let's dive into confidence. Let's say a big company offers me a lot of money to promote their product on this channel. I check it out and it's decent, but has one flaw. First, I hesitate, but then I think, come on, you can't leave that much money on the table. Plus, your audience won't even know about the flaw if you don't spill the beans. So I go ahead and promote it. Guess what happens next? My confidence takes a nosedive and I end up living in constant fear. My brain keeps whispering, did they find out I lied? Will I get caught? I'd be terrified to check the comments. Anytime someone asks me about the channel, I'd never speak with confidence. Doing the right thing builds confidence, while doing the wrong thing destroys it. And hey, I'm not here to preach about morality. I'm just being practical. When you go against your conscience, you feel guilty. Your mind keeps nagging. Will I get caught? Will I get caught? We all have an inner voice that wants us to be good, think good, and act good. Going against that voice plants a seed of guilt in our minds, and that guilt eats away at our confidence. Someday you might really want to close a sale so bad that you think about misleading the customer, and you might succeed. But here's what will happen next. You'll always wonder, did they find out I lied? Your next presentation will suck because you can't focus. Chances are, You'll never get a repeat sale from that customer. A lot of criminals get caught not because of evidence, but because they act guilty. So, here's a golden rule for self-confidence. To think confidently, act confidently. Act how you want to feel. The second big confidence killer is bad memory management. Think of your brain like a bank. Every day you make deposits in your mind bank. These deposits grow into your memories. When you face a problem and start thinking, you're basically asking your memory bank, what do I already know about this problem? Your memory bank pulls up all the related info you've stored before. Your memory bank is super reliable. But sometimes you fail at something and you go, "Hey, Mr. Memory Banker, can you bring up all my failures?" And your banker says, "Sure. Remember how your 6th grade teacher said you'd never succeed? Remember how you lost that job? Remember how your girlfriend dumped you because she thought you were a loser? Remember how you failed that exam and didn't get your diploma?" The author suggests 2 things. First, only deposit positive thoughts in your memory bank. Refuse to go to bed with negative thoughts. Don't dwell on bad stuff for hours. Play with kids or do something to take your mind off it. Second, withdraw only positive thoughts from your memory bank. Imagine approaching your memory bank and saying, "Can you give me some reassuring thoughts?" And your banker goes, "Sure thing. Remember when you nailed that presentation? Remember when you aced that test? Remember when you made that new friend?" Successful people specialize in storing positive thoughts and only pulling out the good ones. Negative thoughts wear you down. Think of it like this. If you put a handful of gravel in your car's tank every morning before work, how would that affect the engine? Negative thoughts do the same thing to your mind. When negative thoughts creep in, remind yourself where they'll lead. Remind yourself that you have a choice. I'm not pretending I'm great at this. Far from it. I struggle with this too. But I try to remind myself that I choose what thoughts to deposit. The author shares more tips to boost confidence. Here are a few of them. First, practice speaking up. Ever been in a meeting or classroom and wanted to say something but didn't? Happens to the best of us. We think, if I say something, I'll look stupid. So we stay quiet. We assume others know more. Each time we don't speak, we feel even more inferior. We promise ourselves we'll speak up next time, but we don't. Every time we stay silent, we poison our confidence. Just speak up. Speaking is a confidence booster. Make it a rule to speak up at every meeting. Comments suggest ask questions. Don't worry about looking foolish. Odds are, for every person who disagrees, another will agree. Second, make eye contact. How someone uses their eyes says a lot. If someone doesn't look you in the eye, you start wondering, what's he hiding? What's he afraid of? Not making eye contact usually says, I feel weak next to you. I feel inferior. I'm scared. Or it says, I feel guilty. I've done something wrong. Conquer this fear by looking people in the eye. Third, be a front seater. Ever notice how the back seats fill up first in meetings or classrooms? People scramble for the back rows to stay invisible because they lack confidence. Sitting up front builds confidence. From now on, make it a rule to sit as close to the front as possible. Thanks for hanging out on my channel and watching my videos. Now lesson 5, how to think creatively. Creative thinking isn't just for artists, musicians, and scientists. It's about finding new and better ways to do anything. For example, a student figures out how to manage his courses and start a side business. An employee finds a way to save 20 hours a week for the company. A salesperson finds a better way to sell more. The author says the first step to being creative is to believe it can be done. When you believe, your mind finds ways to do it. If you believe something's impossible, your mind proves why it can't be done. But when you believe something can be done, your mind starts working to make it happen. Solutions appear in unexpected places. Belief unleashes creativity. Disbelief slams the brakes on. The successful person doesn't ask, can I do it? They ask, how can I do it? Asking how flips on your creative switch. Here's a small exercise. Take a notebook and spend 10 minutes each day thinking about how you can achieve your goals. How can I make more sales? How can I create new business? How can I study more effectively? Soon you'll start getting ideas you never thought of before. Write them down and review them weekly. Most won't be great, but some will connect and turn into brilliant ideas. Another way to be more creative is to listen more than you talk. Successful companies spend millions researching and listening to customers. Similarly, successful people listen more. We learn nothing by talking, but there's no limit to what we can learn by asking and listening. A mind that only feeds on itself becomes weak and incapable of creativity. Stimulation from others is excellent mind food. Mixing with people outside your usual circle stimulates new ideas. Now let's make this interactive. Drop a comment below sharing your biggest takeaway from this video, or share a time when thinking big helped you achieve something cool. Let's get a conversation going. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you want to see more book summaries, check out the playlist on your screen. Have an awesome day!